Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision, right? Like engineering or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to be binary. It's objective.
Right. You fall off a bike, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the black film, and the doctor just points a pen at it and says, there it is, that's the problem.
Right. And that's deeply comforting to us, I think. Human beings really like things to be visible. We like them to be categorized, measurable, and fixed.
Exactly. Clean, broken or not broken. But then you step out of the hard sciences and you wade into the world of modern sociology or, like, gender politics.
Oh, yeah. Then the rules change completely.
Yeah, and the history of our cultural institutions, too.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that x-ray machine is completely shattered.
Totally shattered.
We're looking at a cultural diagnostic landscape that isn't a clinic anymore. It is an absolute battleground. And today, for you, the listener, we are stepping right into the dead center of that battlefield.
We really are. It's a heavy one today.
It is. We are looking at a highly controversial, just intensely debated new ebook that is currently making massive seismic waves across the manosphere and the men's rights advocate communities.
Yeah, it is definitely a text that is meant to provoke, to challenge, and to essentially rewrite the narrative of the last 50 years of Western cultural evolution.
Right. But before we get into the meat of this, I want to make sure you guys know exactly where to find the source material, because today's deep dive is a comprehensive, massive review of this exact ebook.
And you're going to want to see the data for yourself.
Exactly. So if this catches your attention and you want to read along with us or grab it immediately after the show to see the raw arguments, you need to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy the book.
Highly recommend doing that.
Yeah, and you can also follow the author at Conrad Riker over at Substack. He posts a lot of his ongoing thoughts there. And while you're at it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the show. It genuinely helps us continue doing what we do.
Because what we do is take on the heavy texts. And this one, it's dense.
It really is. So the book is called This Miseducation of Women: How Progressive Ideologies Destroy the Feminine Identity by Conrad Riker, published in 2025.
Fresh off the digital presses.
Right. Now, this is crucial, and I want to look right at the proverbial camera and say this directly to you, the listener. We have to make a very firm, explicit disclaimer today.
Yeah, we really need to be clear about this.
Because this book contains highly politically charged content regarding feminism, Marxism, gender politics, and the fundamental structures of our society, I need to be crystal clear neither of us as hosts is taking a side today.
Absolutely not. No sides.
Our mission in this deep dive is strictly to impartially report on, unpack, and thoroughly analyze the arguments presented in Riker's source material.
We are just the messengers here.
Exactly. We're here to help you understand the specific viewpoints, the historical institutional critiques, and the sociological claims the author is making. We are entirely neutral observers unpacking the text.
Right. We are not endorsing these viewpoints. We're just holding them up to the light so you can see exactly what is animating this massive online movement right now.
Perfectly said. So to give everyone the overview of what that movement actually believes, we need to look at Riker's central thesis. What's the mission here?
Well, the core mission of our deep dive today is to explore his argument that modern institutions, and we are talking about everything from prestigious universities and family courts to, the multi-billion-dollar fertility industry.
Even the dating apps, right?
Oh yeah, even the algorithms on your dating apps.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that all of these have been systematically captured.
Okay, captured by who? Exactly.
He claims they've been captured by progressive and Marxist ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand this, Riker spends a lot of time looking at the history of these institutions before this alleged capture took place.
Right, like what they used to be.
Exactly. He paints a picture of universities that were historically dedicated to objective truth-seeking and family courts that historically prioritized the preservation of the nuclear family.
Okay, so what's the result of the capture, in his view?
He says the result of this modern ideological capture is basically a three-pronged catastrophe. He calls it the deliberate erasure of biological reality, the literal and psychological sterilization of women, and the legal and cultural subjugation of men.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to even begin to understand the sweeping apocalyptic claims this book makes about societal collapse, we really have to start where Riker starts.
Which is the foundational level.
Right, what he calls the foundational war against biological reality. And he argues this war doesn't start with laws, actually. It starts with the erasure of the word and the concept of mother.
Yeah, and he doesn't view this as some subtle accidental cultural drift,
Yeah.
like it just naturally happened over time.
Not at all.
No, he frames it as a deliberate, tactical linguistic war. He argues that modern feminism and gender studies departments have literally weaponized language to alter reality.
And the prime example he uses, which really sets the tone for the entire book, is the medical and academic terminology shift.
Yeah, the hospital intake forms.
Exactly. He points to forms across the country systematically replacing the word mother with terms like chest feeder or gestational parent.
Which is a huge shift in how we categorize human life. And he also cites zoology departments mandating the use of egg-producing bodies instead of just saying female animals.
Which is just wild to think about from a purely linguistic standpoint. I mean, egg-producing bodies for a bird.
Right. It sounds incredibly clinical and detached.
But he goes beyond just words on a medical form or in a lab. He talks about the physical, spatial erasure of motherhood in the real world, specifically on college campuses.
The Berkeley story, yeah, that one is striking.
It is. There's this incredible anecdote he shares about UC Berkeley. He says that last spring, bronze plaques honoring maternal virtue that had been on the campus since 1923 were just gone.
Just removed entirely.
Yeah, removed in the dead of night because campus activists allegedly petitioned that honoring motherhood was a form of heteronormative violence.
And he contrasts that historical erasure with what institutions are choosing to fund and build today. Because it's not just about what they take away.
Right.
It's about what they put in its place.
Right. They fill the void.
Exactly. He cites Yale University spending $250,000 in student fees to replace a historic motherhood monument with what he describes as a twisted metal blob.
It was titled Gender Fluid, wasn't it?
Yes, gender fluid.
He literally says it looks like a car crash victim frozen in aluminum. That was his exact phrasing.
I remember that quote, yeah. And for Riker, this is the crux of the issue. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Riker is arguing that this isn't just about bureaucratic efficiency.
It's not just updating forms.
Right. It's not about being polite or inclusive to a small minority of people. He explicitly frames this as ideological warfare.
And he ties it to Marxism, right?
He does. He dives deep into the Marxist critiques of the family,
Yep.
referencing thinkers who argued that the nuclear family is fundamentally an oppressive capitalist structure.
So the family itself is the enemy in that ideology.
Exactly. Therefore, Riker claims, if your ideological goal is to dismantle the nuclear family, to pave the way for a more collectivist society, the very first step is to dismantle the language that defines the family. You have to delete the mother.
But I have to push back on the actual mechanics of that. I mean, is the author genuinely arguing that by simply changing the words we use, we actually alter human behavior?
That is his argument, yeah.
It's like he's saying if you delete the word engine from a car manual, people will eventually forget how to drive or forget that cars even have engines.
That's a good analogy.
I mean, does changing mother to gestational parent actually stop a woman from feeling like a mother or stop a child from needing one? It just seems like a stretch to say that bureaucratic jargon can overwrite thousands of years of human instinct.
Well, Riker anticipates that exact criticism. He answers it by leaning heavily into evolutionary psychology.
Okay, how so?
He specifically references the work of David Buss and others who study the biological basis of human mating and family structures. Riker's argument is that no, you can't actually change the underlying biology.
So you can't rewrite the instinct.
Right, you can't rewrite the instinct.
Yeah.
He says we are essentially humans running 40-year-old software on hardware designed for 25.
Wait, meaning what exactly? Break that down.
Meaning our biological imperatives, our evolutionary wiring regarding sex, reproduction, and family bonds are millions of years old. That's the hardware.
Okay, I follow.
So when institutions try to force this new linguistic and social software onto our ancient hardware, it doesn't upgrade us. It causes massive societal glitches. The damage, he argues, isn't that they succeed in changing human nature. The damage occurs in the attempt to force the change.
Right, the friction it causes.
Exactly. By controlling the terminology and the legal definitions of family, the state is attempting to insert itself in place of the parent as the ultimate authority.
And when the hardware rejects the software, you get conflict. Real-world conflict. He brings extensive receipts of international pushback to show that everyday people are experiencing this glitch and fighting it.
Yeah, he really scours the globe for these examples.
He talks about this Swedish father, Lars Johansson. According to the book, Johansson actually took Swedish educational authorities to court when his daughter's school tried to force gender-neutral pronouns on her against the family's wishes.
And he won, didn't he?
He did. Johansson won 50,000 kroner in damages. Riker uses this to prove that ordinary men, when pushed to the brink, can punch back against the ideological state.
He also points to Polish courts, noting a fascinating case with a plaintiff named Marek Nowak.
Oh, right, the maternal alienation suit.
Yes, Nowak filed a maternal alienation suit against the implementation of gender-neutral parenting laws in his district. He argued the state was enabling his ex-wife to deny their child's biological reality by erasing the legal distinction of her motherhood.
That is a fascinating legal angle.
It really is. And Nowak won, creating a legal precedent in Poland that recognizes mother-child bonds as biologically and legally irreplaceable. Riker uses these international examples to say, look, the biological reality is inevitably reasserting itself against the ideological state.
But the stakes, as Riker describes them, are terrifyingly high for parents who resist in jurisdictions where the state has more power.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the Canadian father.
Yeah, that story is incredibly bleak.
It is. Riker details a story of a Canadian man who was arrested literally in his own driveway, put in handcuffs by police. His crime. He called his daughter she in a public forum after her school and medical providers had declared she was a they.
And he refused a court order, right?
Exactly. He refused to comply with a court order demanding he use the new pronouns. Riker says the police used a repurposed conversion therapy law to arrest a father for misgendering his own child.
Wow.
Yeah. For the author, this is the absolute apex of his argument. The state is attempting to completely replace the biological parents and enforce compliance through actual physical incarceration.
It's a striking, chilling image for the reader. And it serves a very specific structural purpose in Riker's book.
How so?
Well, if the state and academia are successfully erasing the concept of motherhood, both linguistically and legally, you have to ask, what are they replacing it with? Because nature abhors a vacuum.
Something has to fill that space.
Right. And according to the book, they are replacing natural motherhood with a multi-billion-dollar industrial complex designed to profit off the biological clock.
Which brings us right into what Riker calls the sterilization curriculum. And I'll be honest, this section of the book is intense.
It's probably the most aggressive critique in the whole text.
Building on that erasure of the mother, Riker believes that modern academia isn't just passively teaching bad ideas in gender studies classes. He claims they are actively, aggressively profiting from pushing young women away from natural fertility.
Yeah, he describes walking into a major university health fair to illustrate this.
Right. Historically, these things were about basic wellness, nutrition, mental health, maybe physical fitness. But he walks in and sees Planned Parenthood reps handing out hormonal birth control, in his words, like dealers handing out samples at a rave.
He paints a picture of a university environment that is deeply, systematically hostile to human reproduction. He talks about the messaging being omnipresent.
It's everywhere on campus, according to him.
Exactly. He mentions seeing official student union graffiti above a gender studies podium at Northwestern University that read, "Stop breeding, save the planet."
Wow. That is blunt.
Very blunt. He talks about syllabi that explicitly frame pregnancy not as a miraculous biological function, but as a state of patriarchal oppression. And he cites workshops on decolonizing the womb.
Decolonizing the womb.
Yeah. The overarching message to young women, Riker argues, is that creating life is essentially an act of ecological terrorism or like a pathetic submission to male dominance.
And he says this results in a massive societal shift where women transition from cradles to credentials. They're sold the idea that a corner office, a master's degree, and corporate validation are infinitely more fulfilling than building a family.
But the clock is ticking the whole time.
Right. And here is the tragic irony. Riker points out, biology does not care about your promotion. He says these institutions are funneling women directly into a booming $15 billion fertility industry by convincing them they can just hit pause on nature.
Yeah, the book frames things like corporate egg freezing as the ultimate cynical feminist trap.
Right.
Riker notes that mega corporations like Goldman Sachs now offer egg freezing as a premier benefit to their female employees.
That's packaged as empowerment, right?
Oh, totally. It says, don't let biology slow down your career trajectory. We've got you covered.
But Riker looks at the mechanics of this and argues this is actually corporate-funded sterilization. It's a way to promise women promotions if they're willing to sacrifice their biological prime, their 20s and early 30s, to the company.
Knowing full well the technology they are relying on is highly fallible.
Right, and the statistical data he drops to support this is just brutal. He dives into the actual success rates of in vitro fertilization and egg freezing, which the glossy brochures often just gloss over.
The numbers are sobering.
He cites that the success rate for a live birth from frozen eggs by age 40 is a dismal 6%.
6%? That's almost nothing.
If you try to get pregnant naturally at 42, you have a 3 to 5% chance. So these women are being sold a profound lie. They are told they can have it all at 45, and when the time comes, they end up with empty wombs, devastating heartbreak, and a massive six-figure bill from the fertility clinic.
Exactly. Riker describes this as the nanny state sterilization loop. He connects the academic messaging to both corporate exploitation and the welfare state.
How does welfare fit into the corporate side?
He argues that progressive policies push women away from relying on husbands and fathers, substituting state welfare or corporate reliance instead. This creates fragmented, fatherless homes, which in turn demand more state welfare. It's a feedback loop.
Okay, I see.
But what's truly insidious, according to Riker, is the hypocrisy at the top. He specifically calls out elite progressives highlighting Hollywood celebrities and tech billionaires who preach constantly about overpopulation and carbon footprints.
Right, while they themselves are utilizing surrogates to have 3 or 4 children.
Exactly. They're essentially outsourcing the physical, biological burden of pregnancy.
Precisely. They are commodifying the bodies of poorer women to carry their genetic material, avoiding the stretch marks and the physical risks. Riker says they're effectively acting as feudal lords of reproduction while simultaneously preaching anti-natalism to the working classes.
And the risks are real. Riker notes that surrogates face a 300% higher risk of preeclampsia, which is a life-threatening blood pressure condition. But the industry entirely glosses over this to serve the wealthy elites who want designer babies without the physical toll.
Here's where it gets really honestly kind of dystopian.
Yeah, it gets dark here.
The book goes deep into the dark side of this genetic market. Riker calls it genetic gentrification. He describes an absolute academic apartheid in the sperm and egg trade.
The pricing differences are insane.
He says women are paying up to $1,200 for a single vial of Ivy League, Harvard pedigree sperm, trying to guarantee a high IQ, high-earning child. Meanwhile, you can go to a discount bin at a place like Salt Lake Cryobank and get a sample from a state U dropout who likes monster trucks for $200.
It is literally a stock market for human traits.
It echoes the economic redlining of the past, but on a genetic level. How does he tie this bizarre human commodity trading back to his central thesis about the capture of medical institutions?
He ties it back by explaining the economic incentives. He argues that the medical and academic institutions created this market by intentionally delaying natural family formation.
By pushing the cradles to credentials thing?
Exactly. Yeah. If a woman marries at 24, natural reproduction is usually free and highly effective. But by convincing women to wait until their natural fertility is largely depleted by age 38, the institutions created a desperate, wealthy consumer base.
Wow. So they manufactured the demand.
That's his claim.
Yeah.
Once reproduction is removed from the natural biological context of a marriage and turned into a commercial transaction, it instantly becomes subject to raw capitalism and class divides. The institutions act as the brokers in this trade.
And they're making a killing.
Right. They take a massive cut of the billions flowing through fertility clinics, all while maintaining the ideological facade of providing reproductive justice.
It's just staggering to view it through that purely transactional lens, and he brings up this specific, devastating anecdote to illustrate the human cost of this system. He talks about Manhattan law firms hosting egg freezing parties.
Oh, the cocktail parties.
Yeah. Picture this. You have 29-year-old associates, brilliant, driven lawyers, gathering in a high-end bar, not for a baby shower, not for an engagement, but to toast hormone injections and pass out clinic brochures.
It's completely surreal.
And he contrasts that false corporate empowerment with the devastating reality he found tracking fertility journeys on Instagram, where a woman posted a heartbreaking update about her 7th failed IVF cycle, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, using the hashtag frozen not broken.
Because the eggs were frozen, but the system broke her.
Exactly. Riker argues she was sold a mirage by the very institutions that claim to liberate her.
Which forces us as readers to look at the other side of the equation.
Right, what about the men?
If women, according to Riker, are being systematically led into a disastrous lie about careers and fertility, what is the ripple effect on the men they're theoretically supposed to be partnering with?
This is where Riker transitions from the biological and medical realm into the legal realm. He argues that the system isn't just failing women, it is actively weaponized against men. He refers to modern marriage and the family court system as the marriage plantation.
The marriage plantation. That is an incredibly loaded, provocative term.
It is, but he uses it to describe family courts as having undergone a complete Marxist takeover. And he doesn't just throw the term around, he brings a mountain of data to back up why he thinks this legal framework is designed to enslave men.
He cites that there are roughly 70,000 fathers currently jailed in the United States on any given day for missed child support payments.
And he notes that 85% of all child support obligors the people forced to pay are male.
But he doesn't just list the statistics to get a reaction. He painstakingly explains the bureaucratic mechanism behind them. He takes a deep dive into a specific federal funding scheme known as Title IV-V of the Social Security Act.
Explain how that works, because Riker leans on this heavily.
Okay, so historically, Title IV-V was created in the 1970s with the well-intentioned goal of helping impoverished single mothers recover money from deadbeat dads so they wouldn't have to rely entirely on welfare.
Sounds reasonable on paper.
Right, but Riker explains how it evolved. Under Title IV-V, the federal government provides matching funds to state governments based on the sheer volume and amount of child support they collect.
So they get a kickback.
Essentially, yes. If a state court orders a father to pay $1,000 a month, the federal government pays the state a percentage of that collection as an administrative reward.
Wait, so the state government literally makes a profit off the child support it extracts?
According to Riker's analysis, yes. He argues this creates a perverse, systemic financial incentive for family courts. The state government maximizes its revenue by breaking up families, removing the higher-earning parent, usually the father, from the home, and forcing him to pay maximum child support through the state apparatus so they can claim the federal matching funds.
It's wild to think about the destruction of a family as a municipal revenue stream, but that's exactly his point.
It turns the court into a collection agency with a profit motive.
He says the courts treat fathers not as parents, but as walking wallets. And he places the blame for the ease of this destruction squarely on the advent of no-fault divorce.
Which is another massive historical shift he analyzes. Before 1969, to get a divorce, you had to prove fault, adultery, abuse, abandonment. Marriage was a binding legal contract.
Right, it meant something legally binding.
But when Ronald Reagan signed the first no-fault divorce bill in California, it fundamentally changed the institution.
Riker argues that no-fault divorce allows women who initiate nearly 70% of all divorces to break a legal and spiritual contract unilaterally, without having to prove any wrongdoing and without any financial consequence to themselves.
Often with a huge financial reward, actually.
Exactly. They are often financially rewarded with the house, the kids, and the alimony. He says it leaves men, in his words, as indentured servants.
The Nevada example he uses is wild.
Oh yeah, he references Nevada's laws, where a man could be forced to pay alimony for up to 20 years based on a marriage that lasted half that time, simply because his wife decided she wasn't happy anymore.
Riker's synthesis here is brutal. He argues that feminism didn't actually liberate women from needing men financially. Instead, he claims it just made women absolutely ruthless about replacing men who don't measure up to constantly shifting, unrealistic standards.
When a woman makes her own money and achieves corporate success, the feminist narrative says she shouldn't need a man. She's independent.
But Riker points right back to biological reality, claiming that despite what society says, human attraction hasn't changed.
Right. He cites data claiming that 67% of men experience actual psychological and physiological emasculation when dating women who earn significantly more than them.
He calls it the mate poacher alert in the hindbrain.
The mate poacher alert. It's an unchangeable evolutionary biological response. Men, according to the evolutionary psychology Riker cites, are hardwired to see provision and protection as their primary domain in a partnership.
So when a woman pulls out her wallet to pay for everything, or constantly reminds him she makes double his salary, the man doesn't feel lucky. He feels neutered. His biological role has been usurped.
And this creates an unresolvable crisis in modern marriage, according to the book. Modern women worked tirelessly to become the high-earning breadwinners they originally wanted to marry, only to discover that they and the men they marry secretly despise the dynamic of a female breadwinner.
The women lose respect for the men, and the men lose their sense of purpose.
I want to throw out a thought experiment based on a viral tweet Riker brings up in the text, which perfectly illustrates this animosity.
Oh, the tattoo tweet.
Yes. He mentions a woman going viral for tweeting that she would rather get a tattoo on her forehead that says equitable means she gets the house and the dog than stay in a marriage where she has to compromise.
It's so combative.
Riker is essentially arguing that modern marriage operates like a rigged casino where the house always wins, and the house, in his very blunt phrasing, always wears a vagina.
Very blunt.
But I have to ask, if the system is this thoroughly rigged, if the financial incentives of the state and the evolutionary biology of the sexes are constantly working against the man, how does the book suggest men navigate a legal framework it claims is entirely designed to bankrupt them?
Riker's immediate, pragmatic answer is extreme caution, legal armor, and sometimes desperate measures just to expose the bias. Because he argues the courts operate on a default assumption of male guilt and female victimhood, he says men have to go to extraordinary, almost paranoid lengths just to achieve basic parity in custody battles.
Which perfectly sets up the absolutely insane story of the trucker in Ohio.
That story is unbelievable.
Riker shares this anecdote of an Ohio truck driver who was fighting for custody of his kids. The court was entirely, uniformly against him. Why? Because his ex-wife had filed claims of physical abuse.
And under the current legal framework, those claims are often taken as gospel until proven otherwise.
Which is incredibly hard to do. The trucker is looking at losing everything: his kids, his income, his home. He only managed to win 50-50 custody because he became an amateur spy.
He had to bug his own interactions.
Yes. He secretly recorded his ex-wife during a drop-off, capturing her admitting on tape, laughing, that she completely fabricated the abuse claims just to guarantee she would win the case and get maximum child support.
And for Riker, this isn't an anomaly. It isn't a one-off story of a bad apple. It is the defining feature of the weaponization of the legal system.
A man has to literally become an espionage agent in his own home, recording his own spouse, just to maintain access to his biological children.
But how does a legal system in a supposedly free society justify this level of systemic bias? If what Riker is saying is true, how is it sustained?
That brings us to section 4 of his argument. The legal bias Riker describes in the family courts doesn't just spring out of nowhere. It relies on a cultural narrative that men are inherently dangerous and women are inherently victims.
And Riker traces this systemic bias directly back to ideological indoctrination in schools, the cultural promotion of what he calls toxic femininity, and the absolute ruthless censorship of any scientific data showing male suffering or female aggression.
Toxic femininity. That's a direct, intentional flip of the usual script. We hear about toxic masculinity constantly.
Constantly. But Riker claims that 68% of Generation Z women have bought into the patriarchy, lie the fundamental idea that all men, by virtue of their biology, are inherently oppressors, and all women are oppressed.
And he points to the staggering double standards this creates in real time institutional enforcement. He highlights a story about a UK university lecturer.
Oh, the Twitter incident.
Right. This woman went on Twitter and explicitly tweeted the hashtag #killmen during a cultural debate. What did her university do? Absolutely nothing. They shrugged it off. They called it venting or punching up.
But Riker notes when a male professor at a different institution simply cited actual peer-reviewed CDC data about domestic violence rates in a lecture, he was fired immediately for creating an unsafe environment.
Just for reading the stats.
What's fascinating here is how Riker maps the path from academic theory to real-world policy and censorship. He introduces this concept of the gynocentric censorship industrial complex.
That is quite the mouthful.
It is, but it describes a very specific, insidious phenomenon Riker claims is happening behind the closed doors of peer-reviewed science. We tend to think of science as objective.
Right, data is data.
But Riker argues that the peer review boards in sociology and psychology are completely captured by feminist ideologues. He talks at length about the suppression of a massive 2020 Cambridge University study on domestic violence.
This blew my mind.
But a crucial piece of his puzzle. This Cambridge study allegedly showed, based on extensive surveys and police reports, that 42% of domestic violence is mutual aggression, meaning both partners are actively hitting each other.
Wow.
But even more shockingly to the mainstream narrative, the data show that in cases where only one partner is violent, Non-reciprocal violence, women initiate 70% of it.
Let me just repeat that so it sinks in for you guys listening. Meaning, when only one person in the relationship is being physically violent, 70% of the time, according to the specific data Riker cites, it is the woman starting it. Throwing the plate, slapping the face, kicking.
Exactly. But he says this data was actively buried. It was suppressed by academic institutions, denied publication in top-tier journals, and ignored by the media.
Why? Because it violently violates the core, unquestionable tenet of feminist theory that men are always the abusers and women are always the victims.
And speaking of how that data is generated,
Uh,
we have to bring up the conflict tactics scale mentioned in the text.
oh, yes. This is where Riker really digs into the methodology of the social sciences. He critiques how domestic violence is historically measured by feminist academics like Murray Strauss, though Strauss himself later admitted the flaws.
Right, Riker says they use this survey scale that simply asks, did your partner use physical force? But it counts a slap to the face the exact same as a strangulation or a severe beating.
I love his analogy here. He compares it to measuring a mosquito bite and a shark attack with the exact same ruler.
It completely flattens the data.
Precisely. He uses this to illustrate how domestic violence statistics are fundamentally manipulated at the source to exaggerate male violence, which is often more physically damaging, while completely minimizing the high frequency of female aggression.
The mosquito bite and the shark attack both count as one incident of violence, which skews the entire legal and cultural perception of who is actually initiating conflict in homes.
And that manipulation has direct career-ending consequences for men in academia who dare to point it out. Truth, Riker argues, torpedoes careers when it challenges victimhood hierarchies.
He details the story of a Harvard researcher who conducted a massive study on Title IX cases. This researcher published data proving that on college campuses, proven false accusations of sexual assault actually outnumber statistically verifiable actual campus rapes.
And what was his reward for publishing this objective data? He was denied tenure, his career in the Ivy League was over.
Riker also points to the Mike Adams case, a criminology professor who was forced to resign, harassed relentlessly, and denied due process simply for criticizing Title IX's abuses and publicly defending the constitutional right to due process for accused male students.
It's what Riker brilliantly terms Kafka box education. Boys and men are placed in a psychological box where they are punished not for what they do, but for their innate traits and for speaking objective truths.
He gives an infuriating example of a Minnesota high school that actually forced white male students to stand up in front of their class and read a scripted apology to their female and minority peers for historical oppression.
He calls it taxpayer-funded, state-mandated humiliation.
And it goes right down to the subconscious level of how boys are evaluated academically. He cites a massive OECD study, an international organization, not some fringe blog showing that across multiple countries, boys receive significantly lower grades than girls from female teachers for submitting identical essays.
Wait, for the exact same essay?
Identical. Why? Because the teachers penalize what they called masculine syntax. They mark down direct statements, aggressive argumentation, and active voice. Meanwhile, they praise the girls' passive writing constructions and hedging language for having a collaborative tone.
If we look at the underlying logic of this, Riker is arguing that the education system isn't failing boys by accident. It is intentionally processing them into doubt-filled worker drones.
By pathologizing natural male vitality, literally doping energetic, rambunctious young boys with Ritalin to make them docile enough to sit in a chair for 8 hours, and by framing traditional objective logic and debate as a tool of Western patriarchal oppression.
The institutions are systematically destroying male confidence and capability from the ground up, which paints a bleak, almost inescapable picture of total institutional capture.
It really does. It sounds hopeless.
If the language is gone, the medical industry is commodifying reproduction, the courts are bankrupting fathers, and the schools are drugging boys and punishing truth, it feels like game over.
But as we move into the final major section of the book, Riker argues that despite this overwhelming multi-generational progressive programming, there is a massive, unstoppable biological counter-revolution taking place underground right now.
He calls it the ovary override.
Yes, the ovary override. Riker's core optimism, and the book actually ends on a highly optimistic note for his followers, relies on the premise that biology will inevitably always trump social programming.
No matter how much girl power propaganda you feed a young woman, no matter how many corporate feminism seminars she attends, eventually her biological imperatives will hit Crefferle plus Alt plus Delete on her corporate career fantasies.
And he points to the massive, undeniable rise of the tradwife movement as proof of this override in action.
He notes a 300% surge in tradwife accounts in the UK alone over the last 3 years.
And a massive dominant presence on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. He argues that women, exhausted by the lie of having it all, are naturally gravitating away from the stress of STEM fields and corporate ladders and back toward traditional domesticity, homesteading, and family building.
And he makes an interesting economic point about this, too. He points out that the market is actually rewarding this return to tradition.
How so?
He notes that in some vocational areas, women who embraced traditional skills, like home economics graduates who become master bakers, or women running homesteading blogs, are quietly out-earning their female peers who were pushed into STEM and are now acting as, in his words, miserable code monkeys in cubicles.
Riker describes an entire underground resistance. He's not just talking about superficial social media trends or aesthetic choices. He's talking about a robust, parallel society being built entirely out of sight of progressive HR departments and university deans.
Right. He details the rise of Substack communities where independent writers are bypassing traditional publishing gatekeepers entirely.
He talks about encrypted signal groups where corporate women communicate about their desire to quit and have kids without fear of cancellation or being mommy-tracked by their bosses.
He mentions an underground newsletter called The Ovary Observer that exposes academic lunacy and shares fertility preservation tips that don't involve corporate clinics.
But my absolute favorite part of this section is his description of the Mothers' Guilds.
The Mothers' Guilds are fascinating.
They really are. Riker describes these highly organized groups of women getting together, pulling their kids out of the public school system entirely, and creating their own parallel education systems.
And they aren't just teaching basic math. They are teaching teenagers how to legally document encounters with Child Protective Services in case the state tries to intervene in their homeschooling.
They are teaching their daughters how to field dress a deer they hunted themselves, how to grow their own food, all while rigorously reading classical philosophy like Nietzsche and Aristotle.
It's this wild, potent blend of hardcore, off-grid survivalism and elite classical education, entirely insulated from state ideology.
And it's not just the women building this parallel structure. Riker documents the massive revival of male brotherhoods, citing over 2,000 newly documented groups formed just since 2010.
These aren't just drinking clubs, right?
No, not at all. He points to the Detroit Brotherhood as a prime example, a group of men reclaiming abandoned neighborhoods block by block, teaching fatherless boys vital trades like plumbing and electrical work.
They are physically rebuilding the social fabric and safety that he claims the state intentionally destroyed. So what does this all mean? We've been tracing Riker's incredibly intense, controversial roadmap for the last hour.
Synthesizing the book's conclusion, Riker isn't just complaining about the state of the world, he is mapping out a literal exit strategy.
He points to individuals who have successfully exited the system and thrived. The ultimate symbol of this biological rebellion in the book is a woman named Amanda Bilkins.
Oh, the lawyer?
Yes, she was a high-powered, incredibly successful partner at the elite law firm Davis Polk in New York. According to Riker, she realized in her late 30s that her fertility was failing under the immense stress of the 80-hour work weeks.
She saw the cliff approaching.
Exactly. So what does she do? She doesn't freeze her eggs. She doesn't lean in. She quits. She completely cashes out, converts her massive 401k into buying rural acreage and high-end chicken coops.
And now, according to the book, she is pulling in $300,000 a year, selling premium, pasture-raised, organic eggs back to her burnt-out, childless former law partners in the city.
Amanda's story perfectly encapsulates Riker's final argument for a return to what he calls a rational patriarchy. He asserts that patriarchy, defined as a system where men are primarily responsible for provision and protection and women are honored for motherhood, isn't oppression. It's the biological operating system for a thriving, sustainable civilization.
To prove this on a macro level, he points away from America to nations that explicitly emphasize traditional fatherhood and family structures.
He spends a lot of time on Hungary.
Yes. He praises Hungary's national policy of offering massive permanent income tax breaks to women who have 4 or more children, essentially paying them to be mothers.
And what are the results he cites?
He notes that since implementing these policies, Hungary has seen higher fertility rates, more marriages, fewer divorces, and has been consistently recognized for rising national happiness indices.
He contrasts this sharply with Swedish research. He cites a massive longitudinal study from Sweden showing that women who fully embrace feminist liberation and prioritize career over family actually report a 23% lower life satisfaction by age 50 than their traditional married counterparts.
Feminism, Riker claims in his closing chapters, promised empowerment but ultimately delivered a generation of medicated depression.
It all comes back to recognizing innate nature. He uses this hilarious but deeply telling example of a Silicon Valley middle school that was obsessively focused on tech fairness.
Oh, the coding club.
Yeah, they tried to force a mandatory coding club for girls to close the tech gap. According to Riker, the club met exactly twice before the girls, entirely on their own, naturally morphed it into a baking and socializing group.
The progressive principle, defeated by human nature, just shrugged and said, well, at least they come to school now.
Riker uses this to argue that pushing girls into STEM against their natural inclinations, just to satisfy an ideological quota, is like telling cheetahs to outswim sharks. You are fighting millions of years of evolutionary design, and you will eventually lose.
Which leaves us with a profound, almost unsettling question as we wrap up our analysis of this highly controversial text. This is something for you, the listener, to really mull over, building on Riker's premise.
Lay it on us.
If Riker is right, and again, we're just analyzing his argument, but if his premise holds true that biological imperatives will eventually cruise plus alt plus deletes societal conditioning, what happens in 15 or 20 years?
Right.
What happens when the generation currently being raised entirely within these underground traditionalist guilds and brotherhoods ages up into adulthood? When these kids who were specifically taught to survive outside the system, to reject progressive language, and to honor traditional gender roles, directly collide with the progressive institutions they were taught to bypass.
Are we looking at a cultural renaissance that peacefully reclaims those institutions? Or are we looking at a complete, unavoidable, and potentially violent societal fracture?
That is the million-dollar question.
And it's exactly why texts like this, no matter how controversial, demand our attention. If this deep dive into the manosphere's intense, systemic critique of modern institutions caught your attention today, please do us a favor like this deep dive and subscribe to the podcast feed. We take the absolute deepest dives into the most controversial waters, and you won't want to miss what we unpack next.
And to fully grasp the scope, the data, and the nuances of the arguments we analyze today, you really need to see the primary source for yourself.
Absolutely. Go buy the ebook, The Miseducation of Women. It is available right now on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books. Read the unfiltered arguments for yourself. Examine the history of these institutions before their alleged capture. Check the data he cites and make up your own mind.
And be sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker at Substack for more on this specific perspective.
Until next time, keep questioning the narrative, stay curious, and we'll see you back here in the deep end.